Since 2012, this has been one of the most important teams in the NFL, John, the Seattle Seahawks. And last year they played in some of the craziest games in the NFL. So we're going to take a look at their schedule today. Figure out what they're going to be.
Made the playoffs every year over that stretch except one when they went 9-7. So you'd say if you were going to have a 7-8 year stretch and your one down year was 9-7, remember general manager John Schneider said it felt like we won 2 games. Yeah. So it shows you the expectations and the standards with Pete, John, and now Russell. You can throw Bobby Wagner in there too, are fucking high.
They are.
Right?
And in a division that, I mean, we think the 49ers will be really good again. Maybe the Rams get better. Arizona's no pushover. You and I have talked about this before. There have been stretches of years where the NFC West is unwatchable. That is not the case right now. The NFC West is one of the best divisions in the NFL.
Well, he benefited, or this franchise did, once upon a time when they won it under 500 and then beat the Saints at a home game because they won the NFC West. I think it's 7-9. Marshawn, the Beastquake happened. Like, it's just, we've seen it. It's kind of crazy. I mean, in the 2000s, I would say, as Holmgren that team kind of came apart, the Niners were atrocious. The Rams stunk. The Cardinals, Bruce Arians wasn't even a thought. Kurt Warner wasn't there yet. They were an ugly couple years, guy.
Maybe if we did every division, you would find this, but the NFC West is this every team in the division, all 4, at some point in time have felt like the worst team in the NFL for a few years, right? That's not the case now, but that's part of the history. You know, one thing Peter King wrote about this in one of his MMQBs, which is about a scenario in which there aren't fans in home stadiums, at least to start the year. And he singled out Seattle. You look at the schedule, early on they have New England, they have Dallas, they have Minnesota. Later, San Francisco, that's week 8. But those first 3 home games, he said, that could be significant if they don't have fans in the stadium. Now, that's a big if. But I would say, John, based on recent history, maybe it's not quite what we make of it.
When you do a deep dive just in the last 3 years, and when I say a deep dive, just pull up their records in the division or at home, it's for a long period of time, right? When LOB and Russell Wilson got going, I'll never forget the vivid memory I still have in my mind when the Saints went up there to play them. This was after they were really humming, and they just housed the Saints. And that place was so
and Drew
nuts.
Brees, they kind of looked disoriented, right?
Oh, they couldn't complete a pass. They couldn't get a first down. That was at the peak of the 12s, and that place was deafening, and the Niners had some crazy defeats up there. Place was an elite home field advantage. Well, the last 3 years, guy, they've gone 4-4, 6-2, and 4-4. So 14-10. But by no means is it like, Tiger Stadium for LSU or something. And now they still pull crazy games out of their ass, and 4-4, one of them was they lost by an inch to the Niners. Like, it's not like they're getting rolled at home. You know, they have some upset victories of the Cardinals. But I don't look at their home field advantage now as just like win, right? I view them as a 10-11 win team, but they're going to lose some games at home and they're going to pull some games out of their ass on the road. To me, the crazy part about the first half of their home schedule, guy, is they got 2 Sunday night games in the first 5 weeks at home. Well, if I told you this was a normal non-pandemic year, you'd go, so you're telling me Jared Stidham's going to make his first career road start on the road against Seattle against the 12s at night? That place is going to be nuts. And you're telling me the other game they have is against Kirk Cousins? I watched that. During Thanksgiving break, they played Monday Night Football against Minnesota, and they kicked the shit out of them. So they took off in the second half. It was actually, I think, like a tie game at the half. But that place, to me, with no fans, like we talk about the places that would be immediately impacted if the first couple months you can't have a soul there. Like for the Niners, for example, I don't know if I look at it that much different. I'm not saying it's a positive, but for the Seattle, for the Saints, for certain franchise, Kansas City, their home field advantage because of the noise is no joke. And even Seattle, they don't win quite as much there. But I've never thought, like, when I watch a big game that they play, especially a night game, it's not loud, right?
Yeah, so to your point, like recent years it's leveled off, but they still have the second best home winning percentage in the NFL since 2012. The Patriots are a clear number 1. And it might not mean, I think part of that is home field. Part of that is they're really good, right? Like they're really good, so they won a lot of home games. I still think
they win double-digit games every year.
Yeah, they just win a bunch of games, and half of them are at home. Now, that said, I do think if you said Jarrett Stidham, his first road game is without fans or with fans, maybe that's the difference in a game. I don't know. If it's Dallas and it's Andy Dalton playing with guys he hasn't played with that much on the road week 3, maybe that makes a difference if there's fans or no fans. Now, I think it'll be Dak, but, that type of thing.
You agree for Stidham, though, it couldn't be a negative for him. It could only be either a neutral or a positive.
My point is just, even if it's a 4-4 home team, that there still might be one of those 8 games where the home crowd matters, right?
Yeah. Wasn't it nice if you're making your first career road start to be able to call an audible? Because to me, on Sunday Night Football against the Patriots, and let's just assume they win week 1 at Atlanta, that would be a juiced up place. Their home opener, fucking place going nuts. You have, maybe Ken Griffey's number 1, but your quarterback right now is in the peak of his powers. He's arguably right there with Griffey, the most famous player in the history of Seattle sports. If you're a Seahawks fan right now, you are taking as much pride as you possibly can in your squad, right? You go, we got Russ. We're ready to make another run at a Super Bowl. Let's fucking go. You're playing the Patriots, which long time removed, but once famously ruined your second Super Bowl. You wouldn't mind kind of kicking them when they're down a little, right?
Down
I think
on national TV
that would be
9 times.
Yeah, that would be a juiced up matchup. The Minnesota one, I would imagine Seattle fans take Minnesota less seriously than they do a Tom Brady less Patriots, even though they take all the
you just know the thing with any of these NFC games, you just know, and we saw it
playoff position.
Yeah, we saw
seeding.
play out last year. Like as it turned out in the NFC, it was not ever too early to start talking about playoff positioning when it came to those games. Just like at Philly.
Well, think about this: the game they won at Minnesota. Who were the 2 wild cards? Seattle and Minnesota. Well, one team had to go to the Saints, the other team had to go to Philly. And Minnesota ended up winning, but that's a big deal. And like you said, the Philly, these are swing games where you lose it or you win it. It's the difference of who you play in the playoffs. And this year, probably even more so, right? With the 7 teams, like it's a big difference to be the 7 seed or the 5 seed. We've never really had that conversation before. Well, we haven't because it hasn't existed. But you would rather, like, if the 2 seed this year is like the Niners or Philly's a 12-win team, you would rather play probably, 9 or 10-win 4 seed to be the 5 seed. That's a big difference.
Would you take Philly or Seattle right now? Week 12 at Philly. I would take Seattle right now.
Yeah. If you told me who do you think wins more games this year, I would probably take Seattle by a game. I think Philly's been 3 straight playoffs. I view them as a playoff team. Their margin for error, just some unknown with Carson, right? He gets hurt. They've had some older players having some injuries. Not like they got rid of Alshon. They're still depending on some guys. Now they did add Darius Slay. They have a lot of continuity in the coaching staff. That's probably a coin flip, I think. Guy, it was pretty tight last year with a 40-year-old offensive coordinator with a torn hamstring playing him. It's not like Seattle blew him out. Now, Seattle, remember, by the end of the season had how many guys? They had to bring Marshawn Lynch back.
And they might again.
Who actually, yeah.
I do think one thing that stands out with their schedule, John, is they play, of their 8 road games, 5 of them are in the Eastern time zone. They have the longest travel in the NFL this year by air travel standards. And so I do think we can look at these games like playing New England after a trip to Atlanta, coming back from Minnesota after a trip to Miami, playing the Cardinals at home after trips to Buffalo and L.A. back-to-back, playing the Giants at home after a trip to Philly, playing the Rams at home after a trip to Washington. Like that's where this gets a little hairy.
I'll give you a stretch here. You play Arizona, so you feel Kyler live. Then you go to 3 potential very physical games. Niners, Buffalo, Rams. That's just going to be a violent stretch of football. Then a 3-day stretch where you have to get ready to play Kyler again. Now, you do benefit from getting the home Thursday night game. I would say, though, if you were just a team in the NFL and you're like playing a non-playoff team or historical playoff team these last several years, Arizona would be a sneaky short week team I would not
I'm
want
trying
to
to
play.
point out that probably what you know if you're watching this, which is that second Arizona game's on Thursday Night Football.
That's a tough little stretch, 5-game stretch. Arizona, Niners, Buffalo, Rams, short week, Arizona. Then at least you get to take a deep breath and play Philly Monday night. But that stretch right there, guy, because you got 3 division games in 5 weeks, and one of them's on a short week against a quarterback. We saw last year when the Niners played the little guy on Thursday night. He's a little terror. And I think right now, I would imagine, and I get asked this question sometimes, like how often do you prepare for opponents in the offseason? I say most teams implement some divisional stuff for their OTA. So you get, on Tuesday you do a period for, if you're Seattle, for the Niners. On Wednesday it's the Cardinals. On Thursday it's the Rams. So you're just repping it in your one's heads, just like, hey, when Kyler's there, maybe you take like this backup wide receiver to just kind of run around, just so you're thinking about it, right? And that's the thing about, it's not basketball where you play your division a bunch, baseball where you play them almost 20 times. In football, while you only say it's 2 games, well, that 2 is, what's 6 out of 16 is a large percentage of your schedule against your division. And I just think Kyler is so different than Goff and Jimmy. It's a pretty distinct, like, the Niners and you would say the Niners and the Rams, similar styles, right? Physical, run the ball. Their schemes with their head coach, similar. I think Arizona's a little just kind of a curveball out of left field. You're like, God, this is just different and they got him last year.
Yeah. I mean, you would say for the most part, especially if Dak is playing for Dallas week 3, there's just a lot of quarterbacks. Maybe you take Washington out, but we don't really know what Daniel Jones will look like by the end. But there's just a lot of quarterbacks in the schedule here that you got to spend some time on. And keep in mind, by the way, that Giants game, you're coming back from a Monday night game in Philadelphia before you play that game. So,
yeah, it's just, one thing Seattle's shown us the last, I don't know, almost decade. Now, those teams early on when they were just elite. These teams the last couple years, you go, they're not quite as talented, but then the dust settles. It's like they're a winner, get in to be the number 1 seed week 17. They win a lot of games. They don't win them pretty. You would think their defense would be a little bit better this year, but does DK take a step? So all of a sudden it's like their passing game now has Lockett, DK, who's good. You got Disley coming back. Hollister proved last year. The running back
Greg
situation,
Olsen?
like Carson. Yeah, I mean, what if he can just give you 40 catches and a couple touchdowns to go with those guys? Their run game, they always figure it out, and Russell's a magician. To me, if their defense, like what they've proven is they don't need LOB to be, now they might need him to win the Super Bowl, but to just be in the mix. If their defense just solid, plays bend but don't break, Russell's going to win you games.
All right, let us know what you think of the Seahawks schedule down in the comments below.
Like the video.